Hi guys, welcome back to another video of A-Star Psychology Prep. In the last video, we have discussed about different approaches in psychology. Today, in this video, we will be discussing about the biological approach mainly, and I've already mentioned that there are different key studies or core studies under each approach. So today we'll be discussing about the first core study, Dement and Kleitman's study of sleep and dreams. Whenever we are discussing about a core study, there are 9 main topics that you have to study for your exams, or each core study is divided into these subtopics. The psychology being investigated, background, aim, research methodology, which includes research design, sample, and the procedure. Then comes the result, conclusion, strengths and weaknesses of the study, ethical issues, and applications. So, when you are preparing for your exams, it is mandatory to study these 9 topics thoroughly so that you can score A star in your exams. Now, let's look at the psychology being investigated in the study. I've already mentioned that Dement and Kleitman study is about sleep and dreams. So, first, let's discuss what is sleep. Sleep is a reduced state of conscious awareness and reduced movement which occurs on a daily cycle. We all love to sleep, and if we are deprived for few hours or few months or few months, we can't even think about it. But few days, what happens? It will affect our body. Do you know how many types of sleeps are there? Yes, there are 2 types of sleep, REM and non REM. REM sleep means rapid eye movement sleep, and non REM sleep means, or NREM means, non rapid eye movement sleep. The non REM sleep can be divided into 4 stages, that is basically from 1 to 4, which is also referred to as quiescent or quiet sleep. Let's take a moment to think why REM sleep is referred as rapid eye movement. Yes, during REM sleep, our eyes moves rapidly under the lids. It is also referred to as paradoxical sleep because it resembles wakefulness as our eyes moves. We often experience vivid thoughts and dreams and our brains are active. However, it is different from wakefulness as it is difficult to wake up. We are relatively insensitive to stimuli and paralyzed. Even though in REM sleep, our eyes moves rapidly, but it does not claims that we are awake at that moment. That's why it is called as a paradoxical sleep, and it is difficult to wake up the person from his or her REM sleep. Have you heard the term circadian rhythm? It's a cycle that repeats daily, approximately every 24 hours, like a sleep wake cycle. It is this circadian rhythm that maintains our body a particular timetable or a sleep wake cycle so that every day we follow the same routine. There's another term called ultradian rhythm, which basically means the basic rest activity cycles that occur almost every 90 minutes and are responsible for different stages of sleep we experience. So there are 2 different terms. Circadian rhythm is about 24-hour sleep wake cycle, and the ultradian rhythm is about the basic rest activity cycle, which is repeating every 90 minutes. Next comes the dream. We used to dream a lot while we are sleeping as well as daydreams. But now let's specifically focus about those dreams which comes during our sleep. What are dreams? Dreams are vivid and generally visual sequences of imagery that occur during sleep in the REM stage. So, during which stage of sleep do we tend to dream? It is the REM stage. How can we identify whether a person is dreaming or not? Is there any way for it? We have already studied during our year 11 sleep chapter regarding there are different kind of waves, so brain waves that are formed during different stages of sleep. And in order to understand whether a person is sleeping or in which stage of sleep, we use a machine called electroencephalograph. You might have heard the term EEG. Basically, it refers to electroencephalograph. It's a machine used to record changes in brain activity using electrodes stuck to the surface of the participant's head. Here, the participant term is mentioned as this is about a study. Since sleep is difficult to study as participant is not so responsive, so cannot communicate their experience. Therefore, an EEG can detect when we are dreaming. So the EEG machine helps us to identify whether the person is sleeping and in which sleep and whether he is dreaming or not. Let's move to the background of the study. Dement and Kleitman were interested in finding a reliable way to physiologically determine when a person is dreaming. They believed that dreaming must have a biological basis and therefore there must be a way to objectively measure it. Do you know any other way to objectively measure dream and sleeping? Just think about it. Here, Dement and Kleitman understood that it is hard to investigate sleep and dreaming because the participant is necessarily asleep and so cannot communicate with the researcher. Even when awake, only self report data can be obtained about dream content, which alone may be invalid as it is subjective. So they used an EEG to monitor the brain waves. Sirensky and Kleitman, that means Dement and Kleitman's 1955 study observed periods of rapid conjugate eye movements during sleep and found a high incidence of dream recall in awakening participants and a low incidence when awakened at other times. So, in the 1955 study, they found that when people or the participants were awakened during that time of sleep, they were able to recall their dreams than when other times. They even used an electrooculogram. Oculo means it will be related to eyes. So EOG allowed the electrical recording of eye movement patterns, their presence or absence, and their size and direction, vertical or horizontal. And what was the purpose of EEG? EEG detects and records tiny electrical charges associated with nerve and muscle activity. So, when the person is in REM sleep, EEG will be relatively low amplitude and high frequency, and when the person is in non REM sleep, EEG has either high amplitude and low frequency waves or frequent sleep spindles, short lived high voltage, high frequency waves. That's about the background of the study. Now, let's look at the aim. The main aim was to investigate dreaming objectively by looking for the relationship between eye movement in sleep and the dreamer's recall. Even though this was the main aim, we can divide the main aim into three specific aims, which are the number one is to test whether dream recall differs between REM and non REM sleep. Second aim was to investigate whether there is a positive correlation between subjective estimate of dream duration and the length of REM period. And the second aim has a sub aim, which is mainly to test whether there is a positive correlation between the length of REM and the number of words given in a dream narrative. And the last and third aim was to test whether eye movement patterns, whether horizontal or vertical, are related to the dream content. Through their study, they are trying to investigate about these three aims mainly. Now let's look at the research methodology. Where did the experiment took place? It took place in a sleep laboratory which in University of Chicago. What are the methods they used? Different methods of experiment and correlation. And what was the experimental design? it was repeated measures design. Let's look at the variables for these three aims. Before that, I would like to mention about two main variables, independent variable and dependent variable. You might have studied that independent variable is the variable which we are manipulating, and dependent variable is that variable which has got an effect due to the manipulation of independent variable. In aim 1, the independent variable is whether the participant was woken up during REM or non-REM, and the dependent variable is whether the participant could recall the dream or not. When we look at the aim 2, the independent variable is whether the participant was woken up 5 or 15 minutes after the onset of REM, and the dependent variable will be perception of whether they had been dreaming for 5 or 15 minutes. As already mentioned that the aim 2 has a sub aim, that is aim 2A, which is mainly focusing on covariable, the number of minutes spent in REM sleep, and covariable 2 is the number of words in the corresponding dream narrative. And the last aim is aim 3, where the independent variable is pattern of eye movement before waking, whether it is horizontal or vertical, and the dependent variable is corresponding dream narrative by the participant. So, in short, when we talk about research methodology, the experiment was conducted in University of Chicago, the sleep laboratory. The method used was experimental and correlational studies, and the design was repeated measures design, and we had three specific aims mainly, and we discussed about the independent and dependent variables in the study as well. Now let's look at the sample. A sample means the group that which we are going to study. So in this study, there were 7 adult males and 2 adult females as the sample. 5 of them were studied intensively, while the data gathered from other 4 were minimal to confirm the results. Later on, the data from one of the sample was discarded due to certain reason, but we will discuss it later. As of now, we have 9 as the sample size, out of which 7 were males and 2 were females, and 5 of them were studied intensively, and data gathered from other 4 were just to confirm the results. Next is the procedure. We know that before conducting certain experiment, there are certain precautions to be taken. The same precautions were taken in this experiment as well. The participants were identified by their initials to maintain their confidentiality. Participants reported to the lab a little before their usual bedtime. They were instructed to eat normally but to abstain from alcoholic or caffeine containing beverages on the day of the experiment. So on the day of experiment, as we have mentioned, by taking the precautions, the participants arrived at the lab just before their bedtime. The participants were fitted with electrodes on their scalps and around their eyes. So the electrodes on the scalp were to measure their brain waves, and the eyes will be specifically for the eye movement. Once they were in a bed in a quiet, dark room, the wires were gathered into a ponytail to allow freedom of movement. The EEG ran continuously to monitor the participants' sleep stages and to inform the researchers when they should be woken up. So, in the laboratory, the participants will be in their sleeping position with electrodes attached, but it will be tied in a ponytail shape so that it won't interfere their sleep. Next to that room or to the laboratory, there will be researchers monitoring their EEG patterns or EOG patterns so that they will get to know whether or at what time should the participants be woken up or not. Now, how did they woke up the participants? They were woken up by a doorbell that was loud enough to rouse them from any sleep stage. The doorbell rang at various times during the night, and the participants indicated whether they had been dreaming and described their dreams in a voice recorder, and then returned to sleep. In short, the participants were woken up by a doorbell that was loud enough, and once they are woken up, they have to use the voice recorder and state whether they have been dreaming or not, and if yes, what is the dream content, and then return back to sleep. Now for your clarity, I've made a table with aim, method, design and variables. So we can clearly state what is the aim, what was the method they used for aim 1, what was the design they adopted, and what were the variables. Let's look at the aim 1. What was the aim 1 about? To test whether the dream recall differs between REM and non-REM sleep. And for that, what method did they use? Participants were woken up either from REM or non-REM sleep, but were not told which stage they were in. They confirmed whether they had a dream, and if so, reported the content into a recorder. So what was the experimental design? They used a natural experiment in a laboratory setting. And what was the variables? The independent variable was whether the participant was woken up during REM or non-REM, and the dependent variable was whether the participant could recall the dream or not. Now let's move to the aim 2. What was aim 2? To investigate whether there is a positive correlation between subjective estimates of dream duration and the length of REM period. In order to test this aim, the participants were woken following 5 or 15 minutes of REM sleep, and they were asked if they thought they had been dreaming for 5 or 15 minutes. Okay, so for the second aim, they were woken up during 5 or 15 minutes, and they have to tell whether they were dreaming or they were sleeping about 5 or 15 minutes. So in general, for the aim, total aim 2, they have used experimental and correlational designs. So specifically for aim 2, whatever we have been mentioning, they used experimental analysis, and the correlation analysis was used for the aim 2A. So the variables for the experimental analysis was the independent variable was the whether woken up during 5 or 15 minutes after the onset of REM, and the dependent variable was perception of whether they had been dreaming for 5 or 15 minutes. Moving to the sub aim of aim 2, that is aim 2A, it was to test if there is a positive correlation between the length of REM and the number of words given in a dream narrative. The method used was the dream narrative was recorded and the number of words was counted. The experimental design was the correlational analysis, and the variables were the number of minutes spent in REM sleep and the number of words in corresponding dream narrative. Now let's discuss about the aim 3. The aim 3 was to test whether eye movement patterns, horizontal or vertical, are related to dream content. The method used were participants were woken after exhibiting a single eye movement pattern for longer than a minute. This was measured using electrodes and an EOG, that means electrooculograph. The dream content was recorded. So the design of the experiment was a natural experiment in laboratory setting. And while mentioning about the variables, the independent variable will be the pattern of eye movement before waking, whether it is horizontal or vertical, and dependent variable will be corresponding dream narrative by the participant. That's it about aim 3 as well. Now I hope that it will be clear by at least by looking at this table what were their aim and how it is divided, how it was performed, what was the method, what was the design they used, and what was the variable. So that's it about the procedure of this experiment. Then after conduction, what will be the next step? They have to analyze the results. The results and the rest of the topics in the particular study will be uploaded as a new video. So this video was about the background, psychology being investigated, the research methodology and the procedure. So if you like the video, please do like, share and subscribe A Star Psychology Prep, and part 2 will be uploaded soon. If you have any queries, please do comment below in the comment box and tell me your reviews as well. Thank you.